This is crazy. What you guys perceive to be the best pick in fantasy football, the 101, might actually be the worst pick. And there is history to back this up. The 101 is cursed. If I see the 101, I'm like, anybody want the 101? I'm actually okay. Who wants to take the 101? I've put in all the hard yards for you. I've done all the research, and I believe I've found the best optimal strategy for 2024 fantasy football drafts. And the best part is, it doesn't matter what pick you're at. It doesn't matter if you have the 101 or the 112. Regardless, this strategy works for early, mid, and late first round picks because we are focusing on not bombing your first round pick. The most important thing that you need to do in your fantasy football drafts, do not mess up round one. And we're going to talk about how you can avoid doing that. Okay, so hit the like button. I got a like goal of 100 likes on today's video. Show me some love by subscribing if you like the channel. Okay, you've heard of anchor RB strategy before, I'm sure. If you haven't, just a quick little summarization. You take a running back in round one that you think can anchor your RB room. Then you get wide receivers, tight end, maybe your quarterback. And then you start to take, the 26 to 33 ranked running back in fantasy that you think is a starter. Okay, that's how the anchor RB strategy works. You anchor your running back room around a superstar and build the rest of your team. Well, I believe the best strategy, and I don't know if anyone's come up with a name for it yet, is anchor round two running back. And this is in PPR formats, okay? So what do I mean by anchor round two running back? Well, here's how it works. You can see round by round. In round one, we're going to smash an elite wide receiver one, and I'll explain why in a second. And then in round two, we can grab a workhorse running back with RB1 overall upside. Yes, trends have changed. Wide receivers are going early, but that means you can get these workhorse running backs in round two, and we'll explain why it's less risky to do that in round two versus round one. After round two, how does the draft fall to you, right? This is how I would typically draft in my leagues. I'm not going to touch a running back from rounds 3 to 6, so that means I'll be drafting wide receivers, maybe a tight end, or a quarterback. From round 7 to 11, I want to grab at least 3 running backs, guys that I think will be starters. And the great news is I'm going to show you 3 mock drafts, 3 examples where I try this strategy from every part of the draft board. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, okay, why are you telling me not to draft a running back in round one? There's a couple factors at play, so let's talk about that. Number one, the running back position deals with season-ending injuries far more often, than the wide receiver position. Why is that? Because every time the running back touched the ball, they are getting the worst of the defense. The defensive linemen, the big hog mollies up front, are tearing their bodies apart. Linebackers, whereas wide receivers, they're not having to go in the trenches like that. So it just leads to more injuries. Second thing is running backs carry a lot of risk. Risk is your worst enemy in round one. You do not want to gain any risk in the first round of your fantasy football draft. That is the one pick you really, really, really need to get right. By the way, if you're in a 12-man league, your first round pick, you should already be selecting one of the 12 best players in fantasy football. You can start to consider riskier picks, round 6, 7 onwards, maybe some rookies once you have your foundation set, but you need to try your absolute best to avoid risk in round one. So what's the backing behind me saying a running back is more risky in round one fantasy football drafts than wide receivers? Well, I researched first round ADP average draft position over the last 5 years, and I'm here to present you with some data. So here's what we're looking at. How often do running backs and wide receivers who are drafted in the first round of fantasy drafts finish top 6 or top 12 at their position? How often? How often do they hit those numbers? And by the way, we'll be looking at season-long finishes, not points per game, because potential injury risk needs to be considered when you are drafting in round one. Okay, so like we said, this is what everything's come down to. How often do running backs and wide receivers who are drafted in the first round, finish top 12? Let's just start there. How often do they finish top 12? By the way, top 12 is such a low bar. If the player that you draft in the first round doesn't finish top 12 at their position, you've probably lost your league. You've probably already lost your league. Top 12? Come on, we're setting the lowest bar possible here, okay? So, in the last 3 years, on average, a running back has finished top 12 52.4% of the time, a wide receiver 84.6% of the time. Vast difference, and I totally understand. Look, there's a lot more receivers out there than there are running backs. I totally hear you guys, but when you look at my mock drafts, I think you'll see plenty of options down the board. How about in the last 5 years? Well, wide receivers have finished top 12 75% of the time, running backs 52% of the time. Okay, so top 12 isn't a high bar. What we should be asking is top 6. Because if you're not drafting a top 6 running back or wide receiver in the first round, I mean, come on. I mean, like, that should be the goal at minimum. So how often, same thing, does a running back or a wide receiver finish top 6 at their position being drafted round 1 in the last 5 years? Okay, so running backs only hit top 6 23.8% of the time in the last 3 years. Wide receivers, well over 53%, okay? How about in the last 5 years? Well, running backs have hit 26% of the time a top 6 finish when drafted round 1. Meanwhile, wide receivers, 55%. Every single year, it's been a better bet to go wide receiver round 1 than it has been to go running back. And again, like I said, we're in a unique part of fantasy football now where running backs that are super valuable are in the second round, workhorse guys that could be RB1 type of finishers. So with knowing this information, how can we avoid risk in round 1? Again, like I said, this is the strategy anchor round 2 running back. Running backs are still important, but they are more risky in round 1 than wide receivers. So we're going to hit an elite wide receiver in round 1, then a workhorse running back in round 2 with RB1 upside. And like I said, we'll fill out the rest of our team. I'm going to show you some examples now of all the different ways that you can do this. Okay, so let's say we'll go early, mid, and late. Okay, let's say that you have an early first round pick. You're at the 101 to the 103 type of range, 104 type of range. Okay, at wide receiver, and you're going to see a mock that I've done here. At wide receiver, you're going to want to hit one of Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, or Jamar Chase. I 100,000% guarantee you one of these 3 options will be available, okay? So in round 1, hit one of those names if you have an early pick. Why? In the last 2 years, all 3 of these guys have a ceiling over 20 points per game and a floor of 16.5. And by the way, all of them are seeing serious volume, averaging over 9 targets per game in the last 2 years. And all of them are on offenses that are very, very good. Now, in the second round, here's a couple running backs that we're going to target that are workhorses. We're going to target a Kyren Williams, who in this mock went at the 204. So we weren't able to grab Kyren Williams in this world. However, Travis Etienne was another target that we had in mind. That is absolutely perfect. We got him at the 209. The other option is Derrick Henry, who you can see went at the 302. Why do I talk about those 3 names in particular if you're drafting early first round? Reason being, they're all workhorses, unquestioned. You cannot tell me these are not workhorse guys. All averaged over 18 touches per game in 2023, and I project all of them to see at least that type of workload in 2024. Okay, so you saw the mock draft here. This is early first round pick, a top 4 range pick. I went with Jamar Chase. Then my anchor RB in round 2 was Travis Etienne, and we just hit in PPR leagues a bunch of great picks in my opinion with Waddle, Metcalf, Pickens, Godwin. We still got Raheem Mostert in the 7th round. Meanwhile, we got people drafting Achane in round 2. We're doing laps around these guys. We get Kyler Murray in the late 8th round. Then we get Zach Moss, who I project to be a starter, and Brian Robinson. Our tight ends go Goddard and Noah Fant, and we hit a couple upside picks late in the draft. So if you're in a, start 2 running backs, start 2 wide receivers, but 3 flex league, try and get these wide receivers in a PPR format to build around them. I really like that team. Maybe you don't, but I know I can rely on Travis Etienne, RB3 last year. And I know that Raheem Mostert is probably going to have a similar role. Zach Moss is probably stepping into the Joe Mixon role, and Brian Robinson could be on an elevated offense. Okay, so that is if you have an early first round pick. And there's so many different variations that you can go. You can start with Lamb, Hill, right? So what if you have a mid first round pick? You have the 104 to 108.7 range. Okay, well, if you're in that range, here's a couple wide receivers you can consider as your elite guys at the top. How about Jamar Chase? Sometimes he falls there. How about Amon-Ra St. Brown? How about Justin Jefferson? All three of these names are going to be, one of them are going to be an option at the 106 for you, promise you. Okay, and in the last 2 years, all three of these guys, just like before, have a ceiling of over 20 points per game, a floor of 16.5, and averaged over 9 targets per game in really good offenses. And the running backs that you can target in round 2 are the exact same as the early first round part of the draft that we talked about. Kyren Williams, Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry. You can see here again in sleeper ADP, those three names were available. I went with Kyren Williams here. And I promise you, in 80% of drafts, you'll have a chance to take one of those three names, Kyren Etienne or Derrick Henry, at the 207 range. So, how do we build out the rest of the team? Well, with the rest of the team, we went Nico Collins, Devonta Smith, Terry McLaurin, JSN. We got an elite tight end in round 5, and we went with Jaden Daniels, the upside rushing quarterback, in round 10. Now you can see our running back room. We went with a couple older guys that we project to be starters on good offenses, and then we hit an upside pick with Trey Benson. What if James Conner goes down? I mean, we have a guy. Let me ask you today, guys. If James Conner, you found out he tore his ACL today, where would Trey Benson be going in rookie drafts? What, 3rd round? 4th round? I mean, he would be going pretty damn high. So again, we're avoiding the risk of a running back in round 1 because they haven't paid off in the last 5 years. And we're still prioritizing the position in round 2 because all the wide receivers in round 1 push these great options to round 2, and they're just sitting there for us. All right, how about the late first round? If you're in the late first round, here's a couple wide receivers you can target. A.J. Brown, who I got here, Garrett Wilson, and Puka Nacua. All these guys in the last year, in 2023, average over 9 targets per game. And projecting into 2024, they're going to be on good offenses as long as Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy. Now, the great part about being in the late first round, and honestly, if you can guarantee A.J. Brown in the late first, that's my favorite place on the board this year, because I know if I can get A.J. Brown in the late first, I'm going to have my pick of Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, or Saquon Barkley, most likely with my 2nd round pick. 3 workhorses. Gibbs shared with Monty, but he averaged over 16 points per game as a rookie. 3 guys who have the RB1 upside. 3 guys on really, really great, fantastic offenses. So my favorite pick right now is the late first, and my favorite start is an A.J. Brown Gibbs, A.J. Brown Taylor, A.J. Brown Saquon, because I have an RB1 with wide receiver RB1 upside, and I also passed on that risk in round 1. So this is what the team looked like. Again, we went with what I perceive to be an elite tight end in a tight end premium format with Kyle Pitts at the 5'10". We also smashed Kyler Murray at the 7'10". So we have a wide receiver room of AJ, Diggs, Metcalf, and Terry McLaurin. We also added some, upside guys, and we just smashed running backs all the way through rounds 8 to 11. Brooks, who has so much upside this year. Gus the Bus, Kendre Miller, Rico Dowdle, Jalen Warren. We just smashed every single one of those guys and still have really good onesie positions with Kyle Pitts and Kyler Murray. So, in conclusion, the anchor round 2 running back strategy, which I guess I'm tagging right now, is elite wide receiver in round 1. Workhorse running back in round 2 with RB1 upside. From rounds 3 to 6, stay water. If your draft is going a certain way, you don't have to stick strictly to a strategy. But from rounds 3 to 6, ideally, you don't go running back. You fill your squad out. Maybe you draft a quarterback or a tight end, and you get, those wide receivers in a PPR format. Then rounds 7 to 11, smash those running backs like the DeAndre Swifts of the world, the Raheem Mosterts, the Jonathan Brooks, the Trey Benson, Zach Mosses. Maybe if Nick Chubb actually starts and gets going, he's a great option as well. David Montgomery, if he lasts that long. Ramondre Stevenson, Zamir White sometimes, guys who will be the workhorse on their team. Last thing that you need to know, and I just found this really funny doing my research, is maybe the worst pick. This is crazy. What you guys perceive to be the best pick in fantasy football, the 101, might actually be the worst pick. And there is history to back this up. The 101 is cursed. It is absolutely cursed. I mean, look at this. When I was doing my research, have a look at the past 5 years, the 101. Let's start with top 6 finishes at their position. In the last 5 years, no player drafted at the 101 finished top 6. Hasn't happened whatsoever. How about top 12? That's a really low bar. Well, in the last 5 years, only one player finished top 12 at their position being drafted at the 101. Do you believe in, bad juju? All I know if I see the 101, I'm like, anybody want the 101? I'm actually okay. Who wants to take the 101? Make that decision for me. I don't want to make the decision myself. So I just thought that would be really, really fun to share with you guys. But that's my strategy. Look, not as detailed when it comes down to the later rounds. And it's really important to state that the worst thing that you could do in a fantasy draft is stick so strictly to a strategy that you ignore how the board is falling. The most important thing at every single pick is seeing how your league mates are drafting around you, because that's going to allow you to let players that you might draft now fall down the board and you get them later. Just stay water, right? Let the draft come to you. Don't be so stuck on a strategy. But for me, this is personally how I am drafting this year. I think the ADP lines up perfectly for us to perform this. And I think a lot of league winning teams will be drafted here with the anchor round 2 strategy. And by the way, is there a better name for this? Let me know. But that's what I've called it. Anchor round 2 running back strategy. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate y'all big time. Last thing I'll say before we stop the video here is you don't need to wait until September to play fantasy football. We're playing fantasy football right now over on underdogfantasy.com. They got real leagues, real tournaments, real money on the line. If you haven't signed up yet, use a promo code LAND. We got a direct link in the pinned comment. And when you sign up with our promo code, we're going to match your deposit 50% up to $250. So right now, if you use our code, you can get $125 free dollars just by using the promo code LAND. That's bonkers. By the way, if you don't like best ball, how about player props? Because they got a lot of player props over there. Every single position you can bet higher or lower on the certain prop, and even season-long projections now, you can bet the higher or lower mark. So check out the pinned comment. Great way to support this channel, and also just to have some fun as we're kind of getting through, the offseason and getting closer to the NFL time. So appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for watching the video. We'll see you very soon. Let me know what you think, your comments down below, and all love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.